Chronicles last week, and of course our tagline for this book is promises made and promises kept. And why is that? Are we trying to, put Donald Trump into our Bible study? Not at all. Because it's a true statement. Because, Chronicles was written by Ezra, either during or right after the captivity when he was, a priest and a scribe and wanted to, not only catalog from all these different books that were around, to put together an orderly account of their history all the way up to the return from the captivity, but also because, to put in order the genealogies, because that was really important when they came back. And we'll even see some of that. Maybe tonight we'll get there, that a lot of these mentions of names go past the time of the captivity and into afterwards. And so that's because you had to be, if you read Ezra, you'll know that those with the genealogies that could prove their genealogy were the ones that went into the service of the Lord. Because if you couldn't, you could still live there, but you weren't part of the thing because you couldn't prove your genealogies. Do you know they still kept a very powerful and very accurate record of genealogies all the way up to 70 AD. They were destroyed in the temple when the temple was burnt down by the Rome. So nobody really knows. Some people have actually, some Jewish families actually say they do know. It's been passed down verbally from generation to generation, and some of them do know what tribe they're from. And, we don't know how accurate that is, but the Jews did a pretty good job to keep their national identity for 2,000 years without a homeland, which is pretty amazing. It hasn't happened to any other civilization or tribe of people in the world, only to Israel. And why would that be? Well, because God made promises, and he's going to keep his promises. And so, and anyway, that's what we did last time. We basically, 1 Chronicles chapter 1 is the whole book of Genesis in one chapter. It's just a review because the creation account, the Tower of Babel, all those things were already known about. And really what was important was the genealogies, like I said. Why do they mention all these people? Why count all these people? Because people count. And they do. Some of the names we're going to look at as we get into chapter 2 and onward, some of these family names we're going to be familiar with when we get into the millennial kingdom. Because these family names from Israel will be able to, they're going to be back in their inheritance in the land. They will have the full promises that God had promised them all along. They will be fulfilled then. Well, anyway, but today last time we saw from Adam to Abraham is where we left off in verse 28. And of course, a lot of these names we talked about last time are the table of nations. And I showed you a map, and I showed you the different areas that all the three sons of Noah settled upon. And then, of course, we talked a little bit about Nimrod, and then, of course, the division that happened in Babel when Peleg, in his days, the world was separated by the nations being confused. And so we talked about that. But we made it all the way to verse 28, that was the sons of Abraham, and were Isaac and Ishmael. And so, and then of course the promise that is the verse that points out the promises made and promises kept is 1 Chronicles 17:11. And it shall be, this is God speaking to David, and it shall be when your days are fulfilled, when you must go to be with your fathers, that I will set up your seed after you, who will be of your sons, and I will establish his kingdom. And so, of course, this is, has a double meaning here. Of course, this was speaking about Solomon, who would be the line of the kings, but the use for the word seed there takes us all the way back to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and then all the way through to David, because Jesus will be the son of David. This is really what God was talking about when he was talking to David. And so, but anyway, the rest of the chapter of First Chronicles 1 is from Abraham to Israel. And so we're going to, I'll read through this. I'm not going to read all the names, but it's important because you'll notice that the genealogy split and end, but continue to go on, went all the way to Israel and then through from Israel. Because it talks about the sons of Abraham were Isaac and Ishmael, and then it talks about these are the genealogies. The firstborn of Ishmael was Nebajoth, Kedar, Abdeel, Mibsam, Mishma, Duma, Massa, Hadad, Tema, Jetur, Naphish, Kedema. These were the sons of Ishmael. So important to notice those names because they make up a lot of the countries that we know of today in the Arab people. Most of them come from the line of Ishmael, but some of them come from the line of Keturah. Now Keturah, it says, now the sons born to Keturah, Abraham's concubine, were Zimram, Jokshan, Midian, which we know what Midian is, right? Ishbak and Shuah. The sons of Jokshan were Sheba and Dedan. That's really important too. Matter of fact, we're not going to look at that tonight, but we looked at Ezekiel 38 and 39 and saw all the names of those different countries that were the names of the heads of those countries that were from the Table of Nations. And but later on in that chapter, it talks about the Sheba and Dedan didn't go along with their thing, but they're Saudi Arabia. You know, Midian and Sheba and Dedan are all the people of Saudi Arabia, the Bedouin tribes that make up a lot of the different countries that are now oil producing countries, but they're more secular. Those would be from the family of Keturah. The sons of Midian were Ephah, Epher, Hanok, Abida, Eldaah. All these were the children of Keturah. And then that was Ishmael, and then these were all the kids that were born to Abraham. But then it goes, we always go back to the line that leads to the Messiah. And verse 34, and Abraham begot Isaac. The sons of Isaac were Esau and Israel. The sons of Esau were Eliphaz, Ruel, Jeush, Jaalam, and Korah. And the sons of Eliphaz were Teman, Omar, Zephi, Gatam, and Kenaz. And by Tema, Amalek. So the Amalekites, they come from the line of Esau. If you didn't know that, that's where they come from, yeah. Could be. We're going to talk about that. Yeah, it's possible that Eliphaz, and there we'll see a Jobab here in a minute. And the sons of Ruel were Nahath, Zerah, Shammah, and Mizah. And then, of course, through Esau is Seir. Now, Seir is the only reason why they're mentioned here is because they will combine themselves with Esau to make the Edomites and some of the other nations there. And of course, these names are, I'm not going to name them all, but these were, Seir was the people from the land of Mount Seir. It's also, you'll know, familiar with Petra. You hear about Petra? These names right here, Seir and Edom, are all part of that kingdom that make up Petra, which is, you can see just by the what's left there, you can tell that from just the architecture inside that mountain that this was a pretty massive kingdom that existed at one time. And so, but that was Seir, and now these are the kings who reigned. Verse 43, jump down to verse 43. It says, now these were the kings who reigned in the land of Edom before a king reigned over the children of Israel. And of course, there's Bela, the son of Beor. Now, who is, we know of Balaam, the son of Beor. So it very possibly that, was Balaam related to this guy? I don't know. Some names are repeated, just like how many Johns do you know? But it says, and the name of his city was Dihaba. Now you can go and look up and they know, but it says when Bela died, Jobab, the son of Zerah of Bozrah, reigned in his place. There are those who believe that this is the Job from the book of Job. Good possibility. We don't know. We know he reigned in the east and from Israel. Edom is to the east of Israel, but we don't really know. I mean, it's the possibility, but the time, like Jeff said, it would match up with the time of Eliphaz, so it is possible. And of course, that most of the people after the flood knew the story. They knew Noah's God. And the three sons, of course, knew God. They knew of God. They had what happened as the faith in the one true God started to get corrupted through generations and generations and generations as it went down. And of course, it came to a head with Nimrod and the Tower of Babel. But some of these people, they had their father's faith. We read that in the book of Job. Job was obviously a believer in the one true God. So there were people that believed in the one true God after the flood that were, because they believed by faith in the promise that Noah told them that one day the Messiah would come. And so that's how the Bible is full of what is known as progressive revelation. You have to understand that from, the first mention of the gospel, of course, is, in Genesis 3:15. We looked at that last week. And that's the promises made and the promises kept through the Son of David. But you'll notice that God and his redemption is progressively more revealed as you read through the history of the Bible. And of course, fulfilled in the person and work of Jesus Christ. But, that's how we learn. And so these people had, some limited knowledge of what God had revealed to them. And that's, putting faith in that is what saves them. Because everybody was saved in the Old Testament just like we are. They're saved by grace through faith. And the promise that God would send a Messiah to die for our sins. They looked forward to the cross and we looked back to it. So, but anyway, it says when Jobab died, Husham of the land of the Temanites reigned in his place. And when Husham died, Hadad the son of Bedad, who attacked Midian in the field of Moab, reigned in his place. The name of his city was Avith. When Hadad died, Samlah Masrekah reigned in his place. And when Samlah died, Saul of Raboth by the river reigned in his place. And when Saul died, Baal-Hanan, the son of Achbor, reigned in his place. And when Baal-Hanan died, Hadad reigned in his place, and the name of his city was Pai. His wife's name was Mehetabel, the daughter of Metrid, the daughter of Mezahab. Hadad died also, and the chiefs of Edom. And so they're repeating all these names. These were the chiefs of Edom. And it ends there. And of course, you remember there was a whole chapter of that in the book of Genesis where you went through, they told you they had king and then chief, and they repeated the names 3 times. And I guess, it meant something back then. And, and today, all that's left is, carvings in the rock. You can go see. They were all, and of course, because there's a whole, I think it's Obadiah, right? Isn't Obadiah, or is that against Moab? Obadiah, I think, is against Moab. But there are prophecies against Edom that were fulfilled when the Romans ultimately were the ones who took them out. They were Idumeans that were around, but after the first century, you don't hear about anybody left over from those race of people. But there are some of these names, and interestingly enough, we have these nifty little things right here that you see. This one here is of Abraham, and you can see the concubines here, and then Keturah and her kids, and then you see down here and we'll get into this later as we go through, all the sons. But that is, you can see, and this is kind of cool because it shows Judah and Tamar, and then Pharez and Sarah, the scepter promises that went through Judah, because Judah became the line of the Messiah. And then this one here is a little bit, this is Terah and Haran and Lot. And you can see right up here, Terah, Abraham, and Nahor, and then all of them that went through Esau and Jacob and all of the wives there. Now, we don't get a lot of this. This is all pretty much from Genesis, because we actually pick it up in, as we pick up into chapter 2, we're dealing with just the Israel. And so basically, Genesis is already over. But some interesting things here, and we read a lot of names last time and a lot of names this time. And Ezekiel, you wonder why, these countries, Ishmael and Edom, they are still the spirit that started in these people were carried down through generation to generation, and it's still there. And Ezekiel 35:5 says, because you have had an ancient hatred and have shed the blood of the children of Israel by the power of the sword at the time of their calamity, when their iniquity came to an end. So that's, of course, what happened. Edom and Moab and Ammon and all these countries, when Israel was attacked, they scoffed and laughed at their calamity. And because it was, and the Bible calls it an ancient hatred. So what we witnessed October 7th was not new. It wasn't a novel thing that happened. It was an ancient anti-Semitic spiritual hatred for Israel that was there back then, and it all started right here. And it went through. Ishmael was a product of Abraham's flesh. And it says that it talks about Ishmael being a wild man and be against his brothers. And what do we see? The sons of Ishmael want nothing to do but to destroy Israel. They're from the river to the sea. And all of that anti-Semitism is an ancient hatred that started back then between, and of course, Edom. Esau despised his birthright. He basically spit at the promises of God and said, I don't want nothing to do with them. And that caused his generations to become, look at Amalek. Amalek is the fruit of that mix of Edom and, Esau and Seir. And so we see these things happen. And it's interesting because the families of Keturah are, a lot of these families that come from Keturah are families that are actually wanting normalization agreements with Israel. And so it's interesting that we see, because Keturah was just a concubine after Rachel died, right? And so Sarah died, and so it wasn't anything wrong with that. So
when we look at Genesis, it says Abraham sent his sons of Keturah to the east to keep them competing with Isaac.
Yeah. And Jeff was just saying that we see in Genesis that he sent the sons of Keturah, right, to the east. So they're not part of because they're not part of the promises of God. And that's probably why Saudi Arabia doesn't really care about Palestine. There's a lot of interesting talk right now. I just heard, even Huckabee came out and said, Ambassador Huckabee came out and said that why does a two-state solution have to be in Judea and Samaria? Why can't it be somewhere else? And he's correct. He says they have what number did he use? 644% times more land than Israel has, and so why can't they carve out a piece there? He goes, I'm not saying that's the plan, but it could be, you know. And very interesting, there's a lot of talk, and supposedly there was talk behind the scenes with Saudi Arabia that before October 7th, this was, you know, Israel was having conversations. These were serious conversations with Saudi Arabia about what is known as the Hashemite Kingdom of Palestine. And that was the original plan before, yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah, Linda was mentioning the. I played that audio clip on my update and I thought it was hilarious. That you know, if France is so concerned about making a two-state solution, well, he says, I got an idea. Just cut out a section of the Riviera, and that can be the Palestinian state. Jeff, did you?
Well, a lot of these Arabic states, they don't like the Palestinians. Like the Kuwaitis and I think the Saudis.
Yeah.
Kicked them all out of
No.
because they were starting trouble within their own country.
Exactly right. You know, Jeff was saying that this is just for the people online that are listening. Jeff was saying that all the other countries don't want the Palestinians because they keep causing problems every time they come in there, and that's true. And I think that has a lot to do with the ancient hatred. You have to understand that there is the violence that comes from an unregenerate, unrestrained heart of humanity. We're all capable of picking up rocks and throwing it at a police car. You know, we're all capable of you know, busting a window glass and grabbing a TV and running down the street. We're all capable of that. But not everybody is capable of taking a baby and chopping it up and throwing it into an oven. That is something that goes beyond what our fallen, unregenerate behavior can do. And that's the ancient hatred. It is demonic. It is evil. And it is on steroids right now. And it's not good. And so, but let's try an exercise here. You might have to think about some of the names we mentioned last week that were in here, but let's see if we can catch on some of these. Turn to Psalm 83. Let's do just a cursory look. Now, Psalm 83, of course, there's you know, conjecture on that from all sides that say this is a prophecy. Okay, and I'm in the let's wait and see camp when it comes to Psalm 83. But I'll tell you, what we're about to read sure sounds like what we're seeing happening today. And but there are some that say it's just a prayer, a prayer for protection for Israel and a prayer against the enemies of Israel. Some say, Amir Safari says it was fulfilled after the 1948 war. And so it was actually a prophecy that was already been fulfilled. Others say, like Bill Salas and some others, and maybe you, I don't know. I know several people that are big Bill Salas fans, and they say Psalm 83 is going to spark the Ezekiel 38, 39 war. I listen to all of that. I read about it. Yeah, Angela. Yeah. And we're going to read this, and you're going to see it. You're going to see it. Because it starts off, this is a song. Now, this is a psalm of Asaph. It's not a psalm written by David. Asaph was part of we'll get into that when we get to chapter 23 and 24, when we look at the 24 courses that David set up of the musicians and the doorkeepers and the different, and we'll talk all about that when we get there. The worship in the temple must have been an amazing thing. I'm telling you, and God inspired David to make musical instruments, and just the words themselves. I mean, we don't get the music to it, But I imagine, and we're going to be able to witness this when we get into the millennial kingdom, because I know I'll be able to sing with harmony, and it's going to be great. And so, but I just, I'm thinking of these psalms, and I'm thinking of the musical instruments, and I'm thinking of what the worship, worshiping's great, but can you imagine like what it was like in the temple during David's time when he set all this up? Must have been quite amazing. Especially think about it when Solomon opened the temple up, and all the people were so excited, and they got to see how amazing that temple was, and all of the courses around the walls, with the trumpets and all the instruments and all the sing. Man, it must have been pretty amazing. But this is a psalm. It's a song, so it was sung. And it was a psalm of Asaph, and it starts off, "Do not keep silent, O God. Do not hold your peace, and do not be still, O God." So this is a call to God to move. Do not hold your peace. We need you to do something. This isn't, do not keep silent. Speak up. This is a call to action. So I imagine it probably had a pretty upbeat, maybe it had some electric guitars and some good drum beats to it or something. I don't know. But, this is like, don't keep silent, oh God. Time to wake up. Let's get going, And it says in verse 2, "For behold, your enemies make a tumult, and those who hate you have lifted up their head." Sure doesn't sound like anything you see going on today, do you? How many, people don't hide their hatred for God anymore and their hatred for Israel. There used to be a time where you wouldn't, trust me, the anti-Semitic behavior of the world right now takes my breath away. I never thought we would see it, and it is everywhere. And it's the same thing with people's hatred towards God in general. Because they hate the Jewish people, they hate the Jewish God, and that means they hate you. And there used to be a time when people had a respect for people of God. It was like they didn't believe in it, they didn't agree with it, and they didn't like it, but they put up with it. But now it seems like we're entering into a time where people just won't put up with it. Because it says, "For behold, your enemies make a tumult, and those who hate you have lifted up their head." And notice it says, "They have taken crafty counsel against your people and consulted together against your sheltered ones. They have said, 'Come, let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be remembered no more.'" That is textbook of all diplomacy in Qatar. What the Arab Council is saying behind when Witkoff is nowhere to be found is about how they can destroy Israel. Every council in Iran, what's Iran doing right now? They're trying to figure out a way that they can beat the U.S. and beat Israel, because they really believe they're called to take and destroy Israel and wipe it off the map. That's exactly. They don't want two-state solution. They want one-state solution with no Jews left. That's their goal. And they'll make a big to-do about it, and they'll take the countries that are calling for two-state solution, they'll use them as their useless idiots to continue to be able to kill and destroy Jewish people. Because that's what they want to do. And this is the ancient hatred we just read about that Ezekiel was talking about is right here. They have taken crafty counsel against your people, consulted together against your shelter ones. They have said, "Come, let us cut them off." That's a nice Hebrew word for let's kill them all. Kill every one of them from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be remembered no more. Now, you know that you have to understand that is satanic in its origin. You know that we get the full story in Revelation chapter 12. I just did a thing about Israel recently, and I talked about that. But that it's satanic, because Satan knows that if he can destroy Israel, he can destroy the promises of God. That's the point. When you destroy Israel, I can destroy the promises of God. And it says, for they have consulted together with one consent, and they form a confederacy against you. So they're coming together as one to go against Israel and to wipe Israel off the map. So that's why people, is this a prophecy of this actual war that will happen? Or is this a prayer against the fact that a prayer against anti-Semitic warfare against Israel at all times? I don't know. I think it's interesting because you're going to notice some of these names. It says the tents of Edom and the Ishmaelites, Moab, and the Hagrites. Well, we just read about them right? And then Gebal, Ammon, and Amalek. Again, we just read about them. Philistia and the inhabitants of Tyre. Assyria also has joined with them, and they've helped the children of Lot. Selah. So all of these people are the countries that immediately surround Israel geographically. Edom and the Ishmaelites, we just talked about them. They are in Jordan. They are South Jordan, down towards, and then Moab and the Hagrites, they're a little bit more to the north. And then Gebal, Ammon, and Amalek. Philistia are actually, that was the ancient Philistines, but geographically that's Gaza. That is the area of Gaza. That is those people there. And the Spirit is still alive and well there, as we saw on October 7th. And the inhabitants of Tyre, that's Lebanon. So so we have, and then Assyria, of course, is Syria and Iraq. So Iraq and Syria, and we know those have all been a problem, forever. And they've also helped the children of Lot. And the children of Lot are Moab and Ammon. They are the two children of Lot. And then he says, after that break, it says, deal with them as with Midian and with Sisera, as with Jabin at the brook Kishon, who perished at Endor, who became as refuge on the earth. Make their nobles like Oreb and Zeeb. Yes, all their princes like Zeba and Zalmunna, who said, let us take for ourselves the pastures of God for a possession. Now, this should take you back to the book of Judges. These were stories in the book of Judges. Now, remember Sisera, who, he got pegged, and then these other kings that were Oreb and Zeeb and Zeba and Zalmunna were all captured and killed. But it's interesting when you think about the story of the Judges and how the psalmist is asking to make these countries just like them. What's the story of Judges? Well, they came into the land, yep, and they had victory under Joshua. And as soon as Joshua died, man, they went right back to their old nature, back to their sinful lifestyle, and the prosperity led to apathy, that led to bondage, that led to slavery, and they were put under bondage by these people, these kings, and they cried out to the Lord in their bondage, and God sent them a deliverer. And we know who the ultimate deliverer for Israel will be Jesus when they cry out to him. There are many stories through Israel's history since 1948 when they came back into the land and before that. But if you ever go to Israel and you hear about some of these battles that they had and some of the miraculous things that God did. I mean, the 6-day war itself is just a miracle. They should have never won that war. When they came in, they were outnumbered 10-1 or something like that. When they declared themselves a nation, and all the countries immediately came up to them, and everybody turned their back on Israel. Nobody helped them. And so they had to scrape together what little they have, and they actually won. It's beyond military people that study these things. It's like what is it? Iran's saber rattling, and everybody's worried about Iran hitting bases and hitting Israel. And, and I'm thinking, did people forget what happened last year? They shot 600 missiles and drones and rockets and didn't hit anything. Man, I mean, I'm a better aim with a bow and arrow than they are. So, I'm not holding my breath and thinking I think they're doing a lot more. I think they're all bark and not a whole lot of bite. Now, anything can happen, but we have to understand that even one military observer, who wasn't a Christian, by the way, that studied that whole thing that happened, said it is statistically impossible that nobody was hurt. Statistically impossible that not one of those missiles came through, and hit a target or hit somebody or something. And so, but we know it's not statistically impossible when you have God on your side. That's why I just a side note, rabbit trail. But people come to me with all their statistics and all their polls. They tell me about, you got this demographic, and as the church, we're not reaching this type of people. And I'm like, I don't put any stock in those things, because statistically, I should be dead right now. Statistically, if I'm not dead, I'm doing life in prison. Statistically, I was, a lost cause, given up into the system. But God had other plans, right? God breaks every statistical probability in the Bible. So from people come to me and they'll say, "Oh man, what are you going to do? Your church is all old people, man. I mean, what are you going to do when they die off?" I said, "Well, I just look at them and say, well, there's always going to be old people, And I've been here I've been at this church a long time, and it's turned over several times, and if this is the age group that God wants to bring together, I'm like, amen. I'm not worried about those things, because once you start worrying about statistical probabilities, you're worried about things of the flesh and not things of the spirit. And so again, with Israel, it's the same thing. They break every probability, everything, and that everybody underestimates them, and their enemies do the same thing. And it was the same thing in the book of Judges. I mean, they were outnumbered. They were unable to be able to fight back at their enemies. But that's why God sent a deliverer, and God delivered them. God's in the delivery business. Did you guys know that? He is, full time. He does it. I'm proof positive of that. And then he says in verse 13, it says, "Oh my God, make them like the whirling dust, like the chaff before the wind. As the fire burns the wood and the flame sets the mountains on fire, so pursue them with your tempest and frighten them with your storm. Fill their faces with shame, that they may seek your name, O Lord. Let them be confounded and dismayed forever. Yes, let them be put to shame and perish, that they may know that you, whose name alone is the Lord, are the Most High over all the earth." And that's the point, for God's glory. Hey, every endeavor that you want to go, feat that you want to do for the Lord, make sure that you're doing it that He would be glorified. Because the moment that we're doing it for ourselves, for our family, for our community, then it becomes a work of man. But when anything that you set your heart to do, that God is calling you to do, if you're doing it so that they may know that you, whose name alone is the Lord, are the Most High over all the earth. If that is your prayer, and if that is your desire, and if that is the end game of everything that you set out to do, it will be prosperous. God will bless it. That's what God wants to do. He can glorify you in your suffering. He can be glorified, in your suffering. He can be glorified in your trial. He can be glorified in your great feats that you do too, in your success, in business, in education, in anything that you do. But we have to remember that the whole point of all of this is that God will be glorified. And Israel is God's people. And yes, they are going to go through a tremendous trial soon. And the whole world will gather against her. But she will come out in the end because God will be glorified because he made a promise. And he's not going to back down on his promise. And like I said, if God can't keep his promise to Israel, then he can't keep his promise towards you. Then our faith is vain and empty. People that want to ignore or say God doesn't have a plan for Israel, they mistake, they dumb down God's word and dumb down God's promises. And so something that's very important. So anyway, jumping back to Chronicles, let's see where we're going now. We're jumping into chapter 2 through chapter 9, which is a promised people. We saw, God, the lines all went, but now we're getting into the family tree of Israel itself. And like I said, the purpose of these genealogy records are because for the people coming back into the land from captivity can trace their family name. And so, but it says these were the sons of Israel: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Dan, Joseph, Benjamin, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. You notice it's not put in order. It's not in birth order, which, I don't know why, but I think it's very interesting that Jacob is not mentioned in this. It was Israel is the covenant name that God gave to Jacob. And so that is what's used here, and I think that's pretty cool. And so, but I think it's pretty cool because it jumps right into the sons of Judah. First son mentioned, may not mean a lot to somebody back then. They might scratch their head and wonder why. Well, the writer is living after the fact and knows that David was going to be the king. But for us, we know that Judah is the one that the Messiah is going to come through. So the sons of Judah were Er, Onan, and Shelah. These three were born to him by the daughter of Shua the Canaanitess. The firstborn of Judah, was wicked in the sight of the Lord, so he killed him. And Tamar, his daughter-in-law, bore him Perez and Zerah. All the sons of Judah were 5. And remember this story. I think it's is it Genesis 38, right? When this happened, and Andy Woods pointed it out, and I thought it was pretty interesting. I never really thought about it before. I mean, I can see why was Genesis 38 put right there between 37 and 39 that deals with Joseph, right? Because why did Israel have to go to Egypt? Because if it didn't get out of Canaan, there would be more problems like this with Judah. Judah left and found a Canaanitess, wasn't supposed to, and had children through her, and we know that with the propensity of the boys, they needed a place for the nation of Israel to grow secluded, that they wouldn't get tainted by the Canaanites. And what a better place than that than Goshen, for 400 years until they became a great nation and then brought them back into the land. So just something that I thought was pretty good thought to think about why that was there in the Bible. And plus also it gives us the genealogies that lead to Jesus. And the sons of Perez were Hezron and Hamul. The sons of Zerah were Zimri, Ethan, Heman, Karkol, and Dara, 5 of them in all. The sons of Carmi were Achar, the troubler of Israel, who transgressed the accursed things. So, of course, we know that's the story of Joshua and Ai. And Achan was the one who had stolen a Babylonian garment and what was a wedge of silver and buried it in his tent. Like, what in the world are you going to do with it? When are you going to wear that thing? But what I find extremely interesting, and we brought it up when I did that study on Babylon, was the fact that, why Babylonian garment, we don't hear anything about Babylon from the Tower of Babel until then. And of course, Babylon wasn't, any great nation at that point in time, but the priesthood was still there. That's the important thing. And it was probably a priestly garment that had, it probably looked like the Pope outfit or something, Ron? Ezra, that's tradition says that Ezra wrote it, and it would make sense.
Were there physical records that he could refer to?
Yeah.
The Holy Spirit?
No, it was he had, when they went into captivity, of course, what books and stuff, he was part of the priesthood, so they would have somehow or another gathered all of the books that they still had, scrolls and whatever, and there are a lot of them that we read about in first, and we'll read about them here as written in there. There's like the wars of Israel. There was a couple of them, but there were several of them. Yeah.
The other thing is, all these genealogies in history and Ezra's time.
Yeah.
So it's some
Exactly.
Ezra was a contemporary
Yeah.
because we're up to date.
Yeah. And some of these are actually repeated in the book of Ezra. Ezra did, again, some of the later parts of the genealogies are mentioned in Ezra because those are the ones that he had to record. That's why I believe there's some similarities to that and here that kind of tie the books together that make me say that Ezra wrote it. Plus, we have and we're going to get into this in a little, not this week, but all the different, there's like 3 chapters of all the Levites. And then, of course, we get 2 chapters at the end where all the courses are written down, which was needed for the rebuilding of the temple. Because all the courses of the priests, yeah, they had 24 of them. They worked 2 weeks a year. And that wasn't mentioned in 1st and 2nd Kings. So they needed to be written down so that they would know how to do the order of service and who was allowed to do it by their name. So, but that's the reason. But we have here, like I said, a Babylonian garment that caused the troubler of Israel who transgressed, and they called it the accursed thing. And we have to remember those things that are devoted to God are not for us to put our hands on. These were everything that from that first battle that God destroyed Jericho, all of it was supposed to go to God. They're His. He gets the first of everything. He should get the first of everything in our life. And I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about our life. God should be number one. We should, the Bible says that we are to give ourselves as a living sacrifice, that we might be able to prove what that acceptable, perfect will of God is. A person who does that as a disciple of Christ shows that, that he is, giving God what belongs to him. And we should never try to take what God belongs. I'll tell you, you start taking what belongs to God for yourself, it's not going to end well for you. And I'm not talking about this, you're not going to lose your salvation, but you're going to ruin your life. And so you don't want to do that. And so, and of course, thank goodness we don't live in a time where our whole family is going to get thrown under a pile of rocks because, we did something, that we rebelled and transgressed against the Lord. Be happy we live in the time of Jesus where all that stuff is under the blood of Christ. I mean, we have, I think we take for granted the goodness of God and in the season that we get to live in. Yeah, Jeff.
But in the millennium, it says Jesus is going to rule with a lot.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. But guess who are going to be his agents with little rods? You and I. I know Phyllis doesn't like to think that way, but I knew a guy that said that one time. He said he was going to be a pot cracker. Crack pots with a rod of iron, be a pot cracker, I think you need to work on your humility a little bit, though, before you get there. And then, of course, it talks about the different sons of Judah, and you'll recognize some of these names because they go. If you go down to verse 12, it says Boaz begot Obed, and Obed begot Jesse, and Jesse begot Eliab, his firstborn, Abinadab the second, Shimei the third, Nathaniel the fourth, Radai the fifth, Ozem the sixth, and David the seventh. And now the sisters, their sisters, this is important, were Zariah and Abigail. And the sons of Zariah were Abishai, Joab, Asahel, 3. Abigail bore Amasa, and the father of Amasa was Jether the Ishmaelite, which is interesting. It means that he was a half-breed. And there was a lot of those that we find in David's mix and his family. But did you know that Joab was David's cousin? And so if you didn't know that, this is where it's mentioned. What? His nephew? Their sisters were Zariah. Yeah, the nephew. You're correct. Yes, Jeff.
I was just going to say that by the time you get to David, he's the 8th generation from the sin of Judah and
Yeah.
Tamar.
Oh, yeah.
By the law, you were out of the congregation until the 8th generation
Yeah.
of an illegitimate son. So suddenly, David's back.
And interesting, because, that is interesting. Never really thought about that, but because,
It just shows how the Bible is all tied.
yeah. I think I've heard that before, but wasn't thinking of it right here. But that's a good point. And so those that were online, Jeff was bringing up that David was the 8th generation from the sin of Tamar and Judah. And by the law, it was you're unclean until the 8th generation. So interesting. That's a good point. Of course, we know who David is. And then we've got David. This takes us all the way to David. But then there are other sons that were part of Judah, and we have the Caleb, the son of Hezron, and had children by Azubah, the wife of Jerioth. And then Azubah died. Caleb took Ephrath as his wife and bore him Hur. And Hur begot Uri, and Uri begot Beziel. Now afterwards, Hezron went into the daughter of Machir, the father of Gilead, whom he married when he was 60 years old, and she begot him Segub. Segub begot Jair, who had 23 cities in the land of Gilead. Now, these are names that you'll hear later on that were part of Machir. Of course, was the father of Gilead, and these were mountainous areas. And then Geshur and Syria took from them the towns of Jair, with Kenath and its towns, 60 towns. All these belonged to the sons of Machir, the father of Gilead. After Hezron died and Caleb Apathroth, Hezron's wife Abijah bore him Ashur, the father of Tekoa. So Gilead, of course, was taken by Syria. This is up, I think, the Golan Heights area, around that area, and it's still disputed land today. But Gilead, of course, you'll read a lot about that in the Bible. And then we get a bunch more sons here that go all the way to from there. These are all the sons of Jaharmiel. He's the firstborn of Hezron, and then it goes all the way down. And then it talks about the descendants of Caleb towards the bottom. Get down to verse 42, and it says the descendants of Caleb, the brother of Jaramiel, and were Mesha, his firstborn. And then it goes, we don't need to read all these names, but it goes all the way down. I think it's very interesting to the end of the chapter. And it says, the sons of Salma were Bethlehem, the Netophathites, Atroth Beth Joab, half of the Manahathites, and the Zorites, and the families of the scribes who dwelt at Jabez were the Tirathites, the Shimeathites, and the Sukathites. These were the Kenites who came from Hamath, the father of the house of Rechab. Now the Kenites were not part of, they were if you remember Moses' father-in-law, Jethro, he was a Midianite, but he was from a part of the Midianites called the Kenites. And they kind of traveled with Israel into the promised land. And they were kind of there with them and kind of living amongst them. And if you remember that the father of the house of Rechab, if you remember the story of Rechab, and he was the one that remember when he rode with Jehu, and you don't hear much about him, but because of the sin of Israel, that him and his family became Bedouins, and they just lived in tents. And they were told not to drink any wine. And if you remember in Jeremiah, we went through this recently when we were back in 2 Kings. And that remember that Jeremiah brought them into the house of the Lord and said, here, drink wine. And they said, we're not going to drink wine, because our father told us not to. And they had obeyed by word of mouth, their father, and their father had been years, and they've been doing everything that they were told to do, and it was it was because Judah was not keeping the word of their father in heaven, and so a special blessing came to them because they were obedient to their father, and Jeremiah brought that. And some say that these Kenites from Hamath, the father of Rechab, will probably be some of the Bedouins that still, there are Bedouins that live in Israel still to this day. Chuck Smith was telling me that I saw an article about recently. It was it was that they're still trying to figure out what to do with these Bedouins. They want to provide a place for them to live. And what they did was they built these whole communities for them. And for the Bedouins, so they wouldn't live in tents, They built these homes for them, and they said thank you, and they used the homes for their animals, and they lived outside in the front yard. So pretty interesting that we still have some of these things that go back into the Bible. Yeah.
The other is a satellite.
Yeah.
And they're living in the tent.
Yeah.
But that's how they want to live.
Jordan has opened itself up to a lot of touring now. So when you go to Jordan, you can go to Petra, but you can spend a few days there and look at some sites like Mount Nebo, and you spend a night in a Bedouin camp and you sleep in a tent. And they do. You'll see the tents there. They're fully functional with electricity in them and everything, and pretty interesting. But some guy's got a tent that's better than our houses. I don't know. But now chapter 3 deals with, and we'll finish chapter 3 because chapter 4 has something that we can talk about next time. Chapter 2 from Judah to David. Chapter 3 is the family of David, the family of Solomon, and the genealogy through the captivity. So this one we'll kind of read through because I know most of the names, but these are the sons of David who were born to him in Hebron. The firstborn was Ammon by Ahinoam, the Jezreelitess. The second, Daniel by Abigail, the Carmelitess. The third, Absalom, the son of Maacah, the daughter of Talmai, king of Geshur. The fourth, Adonijah, the son of Haggith. The fifth, Shephatiah by Abital. The sixth, Ephraim by his wife Eglah. These 6 were born to him in Hebron. Then there he reigned 7 years and 6 months, but in Jerusalem he reigned 33 years. And these were born to him in Jerusalem: Shimei, Shobab, Nathan, which is very important, and Solomon, 4 by Bathsheba, the daughter of Amiel. Now, of course, we know that Solomon will be, we're going to read here in a minute, that he was, of course, the father of all the kings of Israel. But through Nathan's line will come Mary, and Mary will be the mother of Jesus. And that's in the genealogies. In Nathan's line is in Luke's genealogy, which is Mary's. And then, of course, Matthew, that takes the royal line through Joseph, is through Solomon. And then, but 4 by Bathsheba, or it's Bathsheba, the daughter of Amiel. These also there was Ibhar, Elishama, and Eliphalet, Noga, Nepheg, Japhia, Elishama, Eliada, Eliphalet, 9 in all. So David didn't play around. He had lots of kids. These were all the sons of David, besides the sons of the concubines, and remember Tamar, their sister, the story of Tamar. Now, very interesting, the kings were not supposed to have multiply wives, but they still did it anyway, But God still loved David. David was a sinner, just like the rest of us. Bathsheba was his wife that was through adultery and then murdered her husband and tried to cover it up and got caught. And yet the fruit of that relationship bore the line to Jesus Christ. So, the moment that you start thinking that your past is all, God can never love you because you've done this in your past. Just remember the kind of people that God used. Broken people that have the propensity to sin, that have done horrible things. I was a terrible sinner before I came to the Lord. I did horrible things that I would be too ashamed to tell you about from behind this pulpit, and I probably wouldn't want to because you'd probably throw me out the door. But the point is that if God can use David to do great things, he can use you. Nobody's too far from God's redemption, and I think that's why he allowed David to sin in such a way that anybody, almost any normal, not totally seared with a hot iron conscience in this globe, would look at it and think that's a horrible, awful thing. How could anybody do that? But God chose to use that to bring about the redemption of mankind, Jesus Christ. So pretty good stuff.
Well, you've got Tamar in there.
Yeah.
You've got the gal from Jericho.
Rahab and Tamar and yeah.
It's quite a line.
Yeah, quite a line of, you want to, trust me, Israel put the D in dysfunction. Just go read the book of Genesis. And then the family of Solomon, and we'll finish up with this. The Solomon's son was Rehoboam, Abijah was his son, Asa his son, Jehoshaphat his son, Joram his son, Ahaziah his son, Joash his son, Amaziah his son, Azariah his son, Jotham his son, Ahaz his son, Hezekiah his son, Manasseh his son, Ammon his son, Josiah his son. The sons of Josiah were Johanan, the firstborn, the second Jehoiakim, the third Zedekiah, the fourth Shalem. The sons of Jehoiakim were Jeconiah his son, and Zedekiah his son. And the sons of Jeconiah were Ashur and Shealtiel his son. And then Malcharim, Pedadiah, Shenazar, and then the rest of these names. We'll just end it there. But I can't read all those names all the way down. But as we were saying earlier, notice that it continues on past Jeconiah. So now we're going into all of these sons. This Zerubbabel is one of them. Remember, Zerubbabel came back after the captivity and was a governor of the land. So all of these sons, they continued on after the captivity. So that's how we know this was written, probably by Ezra after the captivity. So those names there. But the whole thing with Jeconiah and Shealtiel is an interesting thing. You'll notice that in both genealogies, that Shealtiel is the one that crosses. There's a crossover from the genealogies back into Shealtiel. Now, Shealtiel, some say, could possibility be the Jeconiah Shealtiel were the son of it's interesting. They think that he might be Pedadiah, might be an uncle or a brother of Shealtiel. There's just a lot of different things. It's an interesting thing if you read through it. I've heard a lot of people say certain things about Jeconiah and Shealtiel and their relation, because even it says here that and the sons of Jeconiah were Ashur, Shealtiel his son. In my footnote, it says, or the captive were Shealtiel. So I'm not quite sure how to work all that out, but it's just an interesting thing if you follow, because if you read the genealogies, you'll see that he's in both genealogies in Jesus' line, but through different, a mom or a dad, different kids. But it's interesting how they came back together and then split back up apart. So just something to bring up, but interesting. And we know all about Jeconiah. We already talked about that a couple weeks ago. So we'll pick it up in chapter 4 next time. There's a few things. We'll probably get through to chapter 9 next time. There are some cool things to talk about and notice as we get through this. But you're more than welcome to read ahead. And let's close in prayer. And then we're going to go ahead and pray for Lori after that. Lord Jesus, we come before you and we thank you so much again for your word, Lord. And God, we've we just spent some time talking about some of the stories of these people that you listed, Lord, and a great reminder that you listed these people. They are your chosen people that you have written down in here, Lord. And we find that many of their lives are broken and messed up like ours. And we're very thankful, Lord, that the same grace you showed them is the same grace that is available to show us, Lord. And so that should make us feel a little bit lighter as we leave today, knowing that even as a sinner, you still loved us. You died for us. You provided us salvation that isn't based upon our actions or our work, but by our faith in you. So help these stories, these lists of people, help us know and understand that we are important in your eyes, that you have a plan for us, that you've loved us so much that you went out and gave your son for us, Lord, that to show us that you care for us and you do have a purpose for us. And knowing that you have a book in heaven with our name written on it, just like all these names. And that should give us great joy too, Lord, as we have to deal with the mess of the world that we live in, Lord. And so, Lord, please help us, Lord, to continue to look to you through the times of chaos and violence and just the insecurity of the world that we live in. And we do also pray for the peace of Jerusalem, Lord. As we saw tonight, Lord, the ancient hatred that we see active right now, planning to send missiles to try to blow her up at any moment. Probably one was sent over there right when we were teaching, Lord. And so, God, we ask that you would continue to hold them in your hands and keep them peaceful. But most of all, we pray that you would open their eyes to you, Jesus. That they would come to know you before that terrible 7-year period that we know is coming, that time of Jacob's trouble. Lord, we don't want anybody to have to be part of that. And so especially your people that could be with us on the elevator ride up, Lord. And so we do pray. And we do thank you, Lord, again for this time together, Lord, and pray you go forth before us this week and help us, Lord, with all the things that we need in life. And